A to Z Mysteries, Super Edition 1, Detective Camp, by Ron Roy. Chapter 5. Dink grabbed Josh and pulled him out onto the cabin porch. "What's going on?" Josh asked. "I haven't even brushed. Ruth Rose found the ring," Dink whispered as he tugged Josh off toward the trees. Ruth Rose joined them, scurrying from behind their cabin. "It was hidden under my mattress," she whispered. She showed the ring to Dink and Josh. "Do you think it's hers?" Josh asked. "I mean, what's her name?" "Mademoiselle Musi," Ruth Rose said. "It must be, unless someone else is missing a ring." "How did you find it?" Dink asked. "My mattress was crooked," she said. "When I straightened it out, I felt the ring." "So someone hid it there," Dink said. "But why?" "I hate to say it, but maybe one of my cabin mates stole the ring," Ruth Rose said. "And maybe they hid it in case Mademoiselle Musi decided to search the cabins. If she did, she'd find the ring under your mattress and blame you for stealing it," Josh said. Ruth Rose nodded. "I know," she said. Josh chuckled. "At least we know Remote the goat didn't eat it," he said. "What should we do?" Ruth Rose asked. "Maybe we should tell the Darbys," Josh said. "No, they'd just get all upset if they thought one of their campers was a thief," Ruth Rose said. "Should we give it back to Mademoiselle tomorrow?" Dink asked. "Explain how you found it under your—" "No," Ruth Rose interrupted, shaking her head. "Because then she'd go and upset the Darbys." Just then, Buzzy, Angie, and Luke came strolling toward the cabins, laughing and whispering. Ruth Rose pulled Dink and Josh farther into the shadows. "I have an idea," she said. "Let's sneak into the lodge later and leave the ring where Mademoiselle Musi will be sure to find it in the morning." Both boys stared at her. "She'll just think she misplaced it," Ruth Rose went on. "I guess that is the best thing to do," Dink said. "How will we get in? The doors might be locked." "The kitchen door isn't," Josh said. "It doesn't lock. Remember how Mario told us the goat gets in?" "Okay, set your watch alarm," Ruth Rose told Dink. She shoved the ring deep into the pocket of her shorts. "Meet right here at midnight." They split up, and Dink and Josh hurried into Moose's cabin. "What's up, guys?" asked Buzzy. "It's time to get ready for bed." "We were just talking to our friend, Ruth Rose," Dink said. "Okay, fellas, you can read or whatever for 10 more minutes, then lights out," Buzzy said. "Sleep tight and don't let the Shady Lake monster bite." Most of the kids laughed. Josh got undressed and climbed up the ladder to the top bunk. Dink did the same, pulling on blue pajamas. He set the alarm on his watch, then tried to read. He was reading about bobcats, but all he could picture was someone hiding a stolen ring under Ruth Rose's mattress. Later, after the lights were out, he kept thinking about that ring. For some reason, he didn't believe one of the girls in Fox's cabin was the thief. Could it be Buzzy? In his mind, Dink kept seeing the Moose Cabin counselor on his knees, next to Hunter's bed. Something very weird was going on in detective camp. Dink was dreaming. He was riding Remote the goat through the forest with Ronald the rooster on his shoulder. Ronald began to chirp in his ear, and Dink woke up. The chirping was his watch. He fumbled for the tiny button to shut the alarm off. Midnight. Sitting up, Dink listened to the cabin noises. He heard a lot of soft breathing and a couple of deeper snores from Buzzy's bed. Dink reached one leg up and kicked the top bunk to wake Josh. A moment later, Josh climbed down his ladder and stood next to Dink's bed. Dink put a finger to his lips, and the two boys slipped out of the cabin. They hurried off the porch toward the trees. They were both in pajamas and barefoot. The damp grass tickled the bottoms of Dink's feet. The moon was only partly visible through the trees, but it cast a glow on the ground and cabins. "She'd better show up soon," Josh grumbled when they were deep in the shadows. "I'm right behind you," Ruth Rose said in a raspy voice. Josh jumped and put his hand on his chest. "Why don't you give me a heart attack?" he hissed. Ruth Rose grinned. "Gee, are Moose Cabin boys afraid of the dark?" she asked. "No, but I owe you one scare," Josh said. "Okay, are we gonna do this?" The three of them hurried across the lawn, then the driveway. They crept past the picnic tables to the lodge's back door. Dink looked for lights, but the windows were totally dark. He reached for the doorknob when Josh's hand stopped him. "What if there's an alarm?" Josh asked. Dink thought about all those paintings inside, and that collection of animals that looked like valuable silver. "There could be, I guess," he said, pulling back his hand. "Guys, if the Darbies didn't fix their broken lock, they sure wouldn't bother with an alarm," Ruth Rose said. She turned the doorknob and the door opened. Dink felt his heart suddenly begin racing as they stepped into the dark kitchen. He crossed his fingers, hoping the Darbies were sound sleepers. Then he remembered that Mademoiselle Musie also slept in the house. He crossed more fingers. "This way," Ruth Rose whispered. They walked around the long work table, then through the swinging door into the dining room. Moonlight shone through the windows, revealing a dining room table. On one end, a large towel covered a bunch of lumpy objects. Dink lifted the towel. He found bottles of liquid, some cotton balls, a package of Q-tips, and a small painting out of its frame. Even in the dim room, Dink could tell that the painting had been cleaned. Dink replaced the towel carefully. At the far end of the room, he noticed a chunk. It stood on its end, with the lid open sideways, like a door. Arranged on narrow shelves inside the chunk were brushes, more bottles, pliers, a hammer, and a few books. The binding on the biggest book read 100 Years of American Painters. Josh was staring up at a massive moose head over the fireplace mantel. "He looks like you, Dink," Josh said. "Same ears." "Guys, look," Ruth Rose whispered. She was pointing to a small cardboard box. On its sides were the words, "All safe latex gloves." "She wears these gloves," Ruth Rose said. "Why don't I leave her ring on the box? She'll have to notice it tomorrow." Dink nodded. "Good idea," he said. "Now let's get out of here before Josh tips over something and the cops catch us for burglarizing." Ruth Rose carefully placed the ring on top of the box. The kids hurried out of the lodge and raced across the lawn toward the cabins. Angie and Buzzy were standing on the Moose Cabin porch. They didn't look happy. "Uh-oh," Josh murmured. "Busted." "Where have you kids been?" Angie asked. Dink didn't know what to say. Josh opened his mouth like a goldfish gulping for oxygen. "I found Mademoiselle's ring," Ruth Rose finally admitted. "We were just returning it. I left it on her work table." Both of the counselors stared at her. "I found the ring under my mattress," Ruth Rose went on. "Dink and Josh and I didn't know what else to do, so we brought it to the dining room." "The ring was under your mattress?" Angie said. Ruth Rose nodded. "I don't know how it got there, honest." "You should have told one of us," Buzzy said. "We don't want you kids wandering around in the middle." "Ruth Rose, thank you for telling us," Angie broke in. "We'll take it from here. Now let's all get some sleep. Good night, everyone." She and Ruth Rose went next door to Fox Cabin. Dink and Josh followed Buzzy inside. "No more midnight rambles, guys," Buzzy whispered as he slid under his covers. Dink crawled into his sleeping bag. As he was pulling it up to his chin, the moonlight fell on one of his pajama sleeves. He noticed something yellow on the cuff. It looked like a paint smudge. Dink touched the smudge, and some of the yellow came off on his finger. It definitely looked like paint, and it was still sticky. Where had he rubbed against wet paint? Then he remembered the painting on the table in the lodge dining room. "Oh no," he muttered to himself as he closed his eyes. He hoped he hadn't damaged the painting. As he fell asleep, he pictured himself being sued for $1 million for ruining a masterpiece.